Good evening, preppers and procrastinators. So I have finally taken the Arkin SH4 off of my SIG Cross hunting rifle. I haven't done the warranty on this yet. So in the meantime, I bought this scope for a different gun, but I think we'll go ahead and put it on here. We'll get this set up for hunting season at least. This is a Primary Arms SLX 3-18 by 50. It's a first focal plane. It is the second Primary Arms scope that I've bought. My other one is on my AR-10. Oh, that is a 30mm tube, not a 34mm tube. So I won't be using the same mount, which is okay because I have a different gun that I want to put this mount on. I thought that I was going to use these Arkin mounts that the SH4 came with, but this new scope is 30mm and these are 34mm. So I do happen to have a set of 30mm rings that are medium height. So we'll end up using these. So normally when I go to mount a scope, and apparently that's a no-no on YouTube, so we're not going to mount a scope onto the gun today. And that's okay, because I think that I found a more convenient way to do so. Normally, you take your rifle and you try to get it in a mount and then you get your set of bubble levels out. You try to level the gun. You go back and forth, then you come on, and you get your barrel to match. You make sure that both your bubbles are level, and then you take this off and you start to mount your rings and your scope onto the rifle. And sometimes this bumps, or this will bump, and then you can't tell, oh no, am I still level? And you're looking at it and something looks off and you can't quite tell. So I'm not going to do it that way this time. This time, I think I'm outsmarting the system. But we will find out together if I'm either super genius or super dum-dum. So we're not going to use the bubble levels, and in fact, don't even need the rifle. Rifle can go away for now. Need our rings, need our scope, and we need this vise with a 4x4 on it. So this vise has a little knob right here which rotates the angle of the vise. So I have the vise locked down so it's solid, so the mount is solid. I'm going to put a level on this 4x4 with a picatinny rail attached to it. Picatinny rail is level. Now, as long as I keep this level, I'm not worried about tilting the rifle, cranking on anything, and having the rifle shift and the gun vise that it's in. Okay, so these are 30mm 1-inch riser tubes with the torque inch-pounds on one side. So I'm going to keep that information facing the shooter. Take the top rings off, and I'm going to set them down front and back and keep them facing the same direction. Okay, so this will be to the rear, and I'm keeping it facing to the rear. Same thing for the front. Torque specs facing me. Take off the ring cap. These ring caps are machined together, so just to be safe, you want to keep them always on the same ring, the same ring to the ring cap, and facing the same direction. Chances are it doesn't matter, but that's how the folklore goes, so I always do it that way. Okay, that's front, facing the correct direction. And just generically putting these on here. We'll line it more up with the scope here in a minute. All right, there we go. Okay, so that generically splits the rear tube and the front tube. And just like when I install onto a rifle, I'm going to push the rings all the way forward generically tighten them down for now. Calls for 30 inch-pounds, but this is not the final mounting, so I'm not worried about the final torque. There we go. One last bubble level check. We are centered. Doing these very loosely for now. Not actually applying any torque. Still using a cross pattern. Doesn't require a cross pattern at this point, but try to keep all your habits the same. So you want an even gap on either side of the ring caps. So as I put this on, there's no gap here and there's a big gap here. So that's the side I start to tighten down. Now the gap starts to even out a little bit. Okay, so nothing's even snug yet. I should still be able, okay, a little too tight. Now I can still turn the scope within the rings. Get the bubble level back on top. Right, that is level. So I'll give one generic, just go until they just start to snug a little bit. Not actually applying any torque, just getting all the slack out of them. Now, what I generically always have trouble with is as I tighten the bolts down, I'll tilt a little bit on the scope. So just letting you know ahead of time. This is not probably going to be a first time go. For a torque wrench, I use the Vortex torque wrench mounting kit. The ring mounts on this is 18 pounds. 18 inch-pounds. Currently set for 10, so we'll start with 10, trying to keep an even amount of gap between both rings sides. Alright, check for level. So far we're still on. Alright, roll up to 18 pounds now. Check for level again. Still level. One more torque. Okay, so that is tightened, and this is a level system. So the scope is currently level. We'll take the mounts back off, and because this is picatinny and the gun is picatinny, the mounts are going to fit from here right onto the gun. The only issue you'll have to deal with is aligning it up with your eye relief. The scope was level before we took it off. The picatinny rail is level. So that should be a 5 to 10 minute level scope in a set of rings, or in a set of mounts, that just has to be put onto a rifle. Always reset your torque wrench to whatever the lowest setting it will allow is, so the springs aren't pent up. Nobody likes to be pent up. So now we'll go ahead and clean up a little bit. We'll get the gun vise back on the workbench, and then we'll put the scope on. So for whatever reason, YouTube doesn't like seeing scopes go on a rifle. So you're not going to see this part. Okay, and that, friends, is how you put on a scope. So again, we're using the real Avid Master Gun Vise. We have a 4x4 that we picked up from Home Depot, took to a local woodworker, and had all four sides planed so that it's perfectly flat. Bought a $40 picatinny rail, just whatever the longest, cheapest one was. Might have been a Remington 700, I don't remember. And then a level. And again, the gun vise has a rotating knob for fine tuning the level of the vise. Mounted the scope on the gun vise rail and then threw it onto the gun. Found a position off camera that was good for my eye relief. Held the scope forward on the picatinny rails as we tightened down to 30 inch-pounds the rail mount bolts. This scope is ready to go be zeroed. All right, I'm excited to get this out to the range and test out the scope and the mounting system.